ladies and gentlemen, now it is time for part 2 of my On My Shelf video. You may recognize this ensemble and this background from my first On My Shelf video. There is more wine. If you missed my last On My Shelf video, I would highly recommend that you check it out. I had a really good time shooting it, and I think that you guys may enjoy it. If you missed that video, I was given a set of 8 numbers from the marvelous Katie from Effusions of Wit, and I used the first 4 set of numbers to pull from my unread bookshelf. Now I'm going to use the last set of numbers to pull from my read shelf. So the first set of numbers that I have to pull from my read shelf is Book 2. And the book is Speak by Lori Hall Sanderson. This was one of my very favorite novels as a young teenager. And this book, not this particular edition, but this book in general, has kind of a fun story. When I was 14, maybe 13, 14, maybe even younger, I had a locker. And I had a few extracurriculars that required me to stay after school. I checked this book out from the library for the first time, and the door to the hallway where my locker was unlocked. So me and a friend, we went in there because we needed to put stuff or get stuff out of our lockers. But just because the door was unlocked didn't mean the alarms were off. They were on, and we got like halfway down the hallway and the alarms went off, and being terrified of getting in trouble, we ran out of the building and I dropped the book. I was terrified that they were going to trace it back to me and that I was going to like be suspended for being in a building after hours. Very naive of me, but I did eventually, after like being scared to check the book out again because I was afraid of being confronted, I read this book and I absolutely adored it. It stuck with me for a long time. I don't think I'll ever reread it because I think that it would lose some of its magic. I also really enjoyed the film. It's one of the few, maybe the only Kristen Stewart movie that I like absolutely love. Like, there are other movies that she's in that I like, but it's the only one that I loved. Like, I loved that film adaptation. That film and the book were my favorites for a really long time. If you're unfamiliar, it's a very popular young adult kind of coming of age novel. Our main character experiences some trauma, maybe spoilery, but she experiences some sexual trauma that causes her to all but go mute. She doesn't really talk to anybody, but this trauma that she experienced made her call the cops on a party, and she's kind of outcast because of it. And I don't know, I think maybe because of being a shy person, I didn't experience any kind of trauma as a young adult, but being a person who was sometimes afraid to speak out, I could really relate to this book, and I kept it with me up until I started college. I think that one of my first projects in an upper level class was to pick a modern classic, or to pick a classic, or to pick a novel that we would deem a classic, and this was the book that I talked about. Actually, this also has an interesting experience with the writer. It was one of the first writers that I researched after reading the book because I was so interested in the way that she described her relationship and the voice of the main character in her head. I don't know, it made me fall in love with the book more because it made the character feel more real, because it was real for the author. And, I mean, that's all that I really have to say about this book. I went on for a very long time. So let's get on to the next book. The next book will come from shelf 2, and it'll be book 5. And that book is Bridget Jones's Diary by Helen Fielding. I got this book from one of my favorite used bookstores in the town over. I was inspired to pick it up because I think I had seen some of the Lizzie Bennet diaries, and, you know, it's not something I like to talk about, but I didn't particularly love Pride and Prejudice, but I was enjoying the adaptation of the Lizzie Bennet diaries. I haven't really experienced a film or miniseries that has really spoke to me either. I kind of find the really popular one from 2005 with Keira Knightley, I kind of find it a little boring. Like, I get the visual appeal of it and even like the sound appeal, like it has good score and good cinematography, but it's still kind of dull to me. This being an adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, I also really enjoyed. Apparently, I only like modern adaptations of this trope, but I really enjoyed this book. It was laugh out loud funny, and I don't know that I'll ever continue on in the series because I've heard some mixed things, and I watched the first film, which was really good, and then I watched the second one, and it was kind of not good. I didn't really enjoy it. So it's not really leading me to want to pick up the second book. But if you have different opinions about it, I would love to hear them in the comments below. The third book I'm going to show you today is from shelf 3, and it is book number 12. And that book is Cinder by Marissa Meyer. I actually received this particular edition a few months ago. If you saw my unboxing from a couple of months ago, I got it from my friend Jenny from Adultish Books. She didn't particularly like it and wasn't planning on rereading it or continuing on in the series, so she knew it was one of my favorites and I didn't have a copy, so she sent it my way. I actually never intended to read this book because I remember the year that it came out, I was gonna try to do a debut author challenge, and this book was on the list, and I saw this cover, you know, a high heel with a robotic leg in it, and then all I kept hearing was Cinderella's a cyborg, which now sounds appealing, but at the time I was like, that sounds really stupid. Like, I thought it was going to be terrible. I remember why I ended up picking it up. Jossie, who I mentioned in my last video, she compared it to a similar vibe as Firefly, the Joss Whedon television show, which I had recently watched and recently loved, as is to be expected from Firefly. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give this a chance. And I enjoyed it so much. Like, it's not perfect, but it's good, light fun, and it's an interesting take on a classic fairy tale and making it, and she makes it her own. Like in the whole series, Marissa Meyer makes it a new and exciting thing, even though it's based on these old stories. And I remember reading part of it outside. That's one of, and I think I read the library copy because I didn't have one yet, but I remember thinking, this is really fun. It's so predictable, but I'm really enjoying it. And it ended up being the first in a young adult series that I actually anticipate reading in its entirety. The last book I have to show you for this round of On My Shelf, from Shelf 4, Book 1. And it is The Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. As you can see, this book has plenty of love. I don't know what it is about high fantasy or epic fantasy. I really appreciate reading it in these bulky, chunky, cumbersome paperback, mass market paperback editions. This is the only one in the series that I've read in its entirety. Of course, I was inspired to pick up this book because of the television show, like so many, and I think that because it was one of my first real big dives into high fantasy, it was really hard for me to get into. Like, I enjoyed it, but it was something that felt really dense and there was a lot to keep up with. So it took me like 3 months, I think, to read this book, and I kind of read it along with the show, like so that I could visualize it, so that I could like kind of have a better understanding of what was going on. I still really enjoy it, and I still totally understand why people like it. I think that it will be a while before I can commit to trying to read the rest of the series. I just think the television show does so well that it's really tempting not to continue on with the books. But I did enjoy it, and I'm glad that I own it, and I'm glad that I own the one that has Ned Stark. Alrighty, I've babbled on long enough. Thank you all so much for watching, and like I said last time, if you would like to play On My Shelf and do one of these videos yourself, please let me know in the comments and I'll give you some personalized numbers to do a video of your own. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you soon with a new video. Bye!